Let's examine apologies and how they should be done as scrutiny on Rio Tinto intensifies following the mining giant's decision to blow up the 46,000-year-old Juukan Gorge without consent from the traditional owners of the land. Peter Wilkinson, Rio has failed to lay blame at the feet of any one person, seemingly taking little accountability for their actions. Thus, the story rages on.
Well, it rages on because people aren't satisfied with the apology. And an apology apologies are so overused now. There's an apology in the paper almost every day of some sort, and it is said absolutely genuinely. You with your sporting career will know that apologies are a dime a dozen. The Rio apology on paper is actually a good one, but the reason I think this will hang around is that it doesn't make sense. The background to it doesn't make sense. So you can check out the Rio Tinto apology by Googling Rio Tinto Juukan apology, and it pops up very quickly on their website. But there are a couple of things that are really important and why the media will, I think, stay on this. The first is the board committee that has oversight of the Juukan Gorge or this kind of catastrophe is a committee called the Sustainability Committee. And one of the members of that is a guy called Michael L'Estrange. The review was led by, into this catastrophe, was led by guess who? Michael L'Estrange. I wonder why no one was sacked.
So 3 senior executives will lose bonuses worth around $7 million. Insignificant, really, when you consider Rio's half-year net profit of $4.6 billion.
Yes, again, it doesn't pass the pub test. For instance, the CEO is being pinged a total of around $5 million in total, but his salary last year was around $11 million, so he's hardly going to be selling off the second-hand Toyota. So there are substantial problems, which is why I think the Juukan Gorge catastrophe and the Rio Tinto's apology isn't going to pass muster.
What about the fact nobody was sacked? The Rio board says the 3 executives are the best people to lead the change that appears completely out of touch with community expectation.
Again, you have to think, does this pass the pub test? What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and trying to expect a different outcome. So in this case, you've got the same people doing the same thing or saying they'll change, but expecting a different outcome. The reality is that all these people are middle-aged, all the decision makers in this process. And so they will revert in a few months, most likely, to what makes them comfortable. So they'll keep doing what they've been doing in the past. It's very hard to have confidence that Rio, despite their protestations and despite the apology, will change significantly because of this.
If you were advising Rio from a PR perspective, what would you tell them to do?
If I had been advising Rio at the start, I would have said, whatever happens here, heads will have to roll. You will have to be seen to be cleaning out the people who were in the chain of responsibility that led to the catastrophe at Juukan Gorge.
We've seen big issues come to light with AMP over recent weeks. What have you made of their apologies?
Well, the apologies over the sexual harassment case were actually Clayton's apologies. They were hardly apologies at all. And this is a reason why the AMP issue is going to hang around for a long time. In the case of Bopa Hari, the man who is accused of the harassment, and the board decided it was minor harassment, he said, I deeply regrets the events of 2017, but then goes on to say, the best way I can make amends is to do the job I have been given to the best of my ability. That doesn't wash at all. Any woman at AMP, I would imagine, who's been anxious about this would be saying, that's not the apology we want. The apology we want is I'm going to change my behaviour. I recognise my behaviour is totally out of step with current, what is expected in modern Australia, and I have reflected on it, and I am going to change my behaviour. The difficulty there is that this would have gone through the system. And so AMP has let him get away with an apology that isn't an apology. David Murray, as chair, left and said, my view remains that it was dealt with appropriately in 2017. What kind of an apology is that? Well, it's not an apology. And then he goes on to say, although the board's decision on the appointment was unanimous, in other words, dumping on the whole board, my decision to leave reflects my role and accountability as chair and the need to protect continuity of management, the strategy, and to the extent possible the board. In other words, nothing changes. So again, how did the board let him get away with such a, well, it's not an apology. And so this is going to be both Rio Tinto and AMP. I suspect these will be legacy issues because neither board has recognised what is needed for an apology to wash with the Australian public.
Peter Wilkinson, thank you.